Okay, so now we are, and it's a pretty sexy panel. I think the room is pretty packed. So we have now a panel on investing in the South with a little, really? So yeah, we wanted to bring three awesome Spanish projects that have managed to raise funding from some of the main and top-tier international VC funds in Europe, like Accel Partners, Balderton Capital, and Earlybird, which is our new big news for Carto DB. So let me introduce you to Beatriz González from Seaya Ventures, to Briggs from Balderton Capital, Miguel Arias, Carto DB, Ciarán from Earlybird, Mikel Irizar from Scytl, wow, Chrysanthou from Accel Partners, and Ben is missing. He'll be back. He'll be here in a minute. Okay?
I get this same feeling, it's like good and bad. Yeah. They're pitting us against.
Okay.
Wow.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, that works. Okay, so thanks for coming to this panel. And we have a very interesting mix of international VCs and Spanish companies. We're missing Ben from Packlink, but he'll be here in a couple of minutes. So we have Chris from Accel, we have Ciarán from Earlybird, and Harry from Balderton. And to our right, we have the two portfolio companies where they're investors. So Balderton is an investor in Scytl. Earlybird is an investor in Carto TV with Miguel, and then Accel is an investor with Packlink. So we're going to cover the main changes that have taken place in the Spanish venture capital industry, and also talk about why it's interesting to invest in Spain at the moment, and finally talk about funding in our country. So since we have both venture capital and entrepreneurs, we'll try to get a view from both angles. We can start first with the market, and maybe Chris, you can start off telling us what's your view of the Spanish venture capital scene and how it has evolved in the last few years.
Well, being here with such a huge crowd in an amazing place is a great start. It's something that Sophia and I were joking about it months ago, but it's impressive to see how many people exist within the ecosystem and you don't really see them initially. Yesterday especially, I had a lot of conversations with some of the sophisticated angels that exist around here and are slowly evolving through angels down to micro funds and slowly building their own funds, which is impressive to see. It's never a process that happens overnight, but over the years I've been coming to Spain in my previous roles as well, and over the years as you see the ecosystem evolve and see how many successful investments, exits, and also experienced entrepreneurs coming back into the ecosystem and becoming angels themselves, it's something that has been tremendous. And likewise, apart from the investor community in the VC world, you also see programs like Startup Bootcamp IoT that's starting in Barcelona next year, a lot more verticalized, a lot more special around the expertise that the ecosystem has, which is great for the overall support system of the community. So impressive overall. It's not something that's going to change overnight, so I'm glad to see the evolution of it.
And maybe Mikel, because you've lived in the US for 20 years, you came back 6 years ago, so you have certainly seen a change.
I think it's been a major change in both sides, both in the entrepreneurs and in the VC world. I think the entrepreneurs, when I came back around 10 years ago, we started seeing the first wave of exits, success companies that exit, and then you saw those entrepreneurs just getting to the next stage. It's either supporting new entrepreneurs or getting into the VC world. So you've seen the sophistication, and I think we're right now in the third wave. So basically it's a pyramid, and that's why I think that the whole network keeps growing in both sides. It's basically from the top ones, once there is a success, there is a whole process from investment, exit, and then the entrepreneurs keep giving back and keep coming back into either another project or getting into the funding stage.
And a question to Harry and Ciarán. What do you think are the main strengths and weaknesses of the Spanish companies and the Spanish entrepreneurs? were talking about this before, and
yeah, I mean, I guess, well, here we are in a bull ring, and that says something, right? The Spanish love a bit of adventure, a bit of danger, a bit of risk. You know, I think it's a culture that likes to be creative, that likes to, you know, dare to win, and those are the kinds of people that start companies. And I mean, if you look in the last 40 years, there's only one company in Europe that has started up and reached the Fortune 500, and it's a Spanish company, and I don't need to tell you who that is. But that's only one. Silicon Valley has 18, I think. California has about 50. And we have only one in the whole of Europe, and it's from a little town in Galicia. So that tells us something, that, you know, there is a culture here that can start great companies. I guess if I had to sort of pick downsides, because you did ask that.
room for improvement.
Yes, I think, I mean, you know, it's probably not a country that's famous for kind of being completer finishers. And I think when we look at startups, we're also looking at potential exits, and I think you know, there's a bit of a view particularly in the US. There's a little bit of a kind of unknown factor around Spain. They kind of have this, oh well, strange things are happening there, aren't they? And you know, it isn't going so well. And that's you know, that is an issue, but it hasn't obviously stopped us so far.
Mm-hmm. Ciarán?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many strengths, you know, you talk about it. I know my fear was you were going to leave the weaknesses for me, and that's what's happened. No, I think actually the weakness itself is maybe early in your question, like, you know, because it's such a young ecosystem and it's insecure, you can sense that. Like many other young ecosystems, like, you know, it's nearly apologetic about being a Spanish startup. And who cares? You know, some of the biggest companies in the world have been built in the tiniest of countries, in the tiniest of towns. So, like, this consciousness of being a Spanish startup should just leave the mind. Like, especially the Baltic regions, for example, they're such tiny little fighters. You know, they're not conscious about being a little startup from Lithuania. They just don't care. So I think caring less. The other thing, this is not a weakness, it's just a function of the age of the ecosystem, is that, you know, an ecosystem is a critical mass of people that know what they're doing. Ecosystem doesn't need money anymore, really. It comes from everywhere, you know. I mean, capital is super mobile, whatever, but the one constraint is talent base. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, governments are obsessed about attracting capital and funds or whatever, but it should be obsessed about attracting top-tier international talent. And that is something that, let's just be honest, is going to be a lot harder in Madrid than in London. It's just a function of language and establishness and that kind of stuff.
Spanish are always punctual, as you know.
So you think this apologetic attitude has been there forever, or since the crisis in 2012?
Certainly that's sharpened it, but I mean, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think that this crisis could be the genesis of, you know, if we look back in a couple of years saying, wow, all of these people decided not to go to a bank, not to go to a corporation, not to go to McKinsey, but decided to go and do something by their own. And I think that actually for the entrepreneurial scene, the crisis could turn out to be only a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So a question for you, Ben. It's kind of on the same line. What do you think are the main challenges and difficulties for Spanish entrepreneurs and Spanish companies? And looking at it from two different angles, because I think in a sense some of the barriers we put them ourselves, so it's really our fault. Some of them are just structural, and we have, you know, regulatory issues and things that help that stop us from growing our companies. So looking at both.
Yeah, I think I set up a Packlink with a friend just before I start. Maybe if anybody wants to send a parcel cheaply, Packlink is an online comparison service for parcel delivery. So we set it up a couple of years ago. The challenge really then was, in terms of getting funding, to get over the Spanish barrier, if you like, in terms of people's impression that maybe we weren't going to be an international company, or we weren't going to be able to expand doing it from Madrid. So it took a bit of convincing, I think, just to say, look, Spain is like any other country, right? Okay, there's a bit of an economic situation, but you can still find really good talent. The price to talent quality relationship in Madrid, I find, is really, really good. So you can get great staff for, I wouldn't say a fraction of the cost, but certainly a discounted cost compared to other countries. And you can really operate out of Spain in more sort of more developed countries like Germany and France and the UK at a cost advantage to your competitors who are based in Berlin or based in Paris or based in London, who face all the costs that we know, and you can do everything remotely. So I think there's a great advantage there. In terms of challenges, I think finding talent is definitely a challenge.
What kind of talent? What kind of talent?
Not in all areas. I think in development and in programming, you can find great people. I think when you start going into maybe product, you go into marketing, you go into people with internationalization experience. That becomes more of a challenge. Then you start maybe having to import talent, and that only really can happen once you started growing and you start interesting talent. So people start looking at you and thinking, okay, I might move to Madrid to take part in this project. Before then, maybe you struggle a little bit more there. But I think all that will change in time. I really think it will.
Okay. And then, Miguel, a question to you. Do you think that entrepreneurs are viewed differently? Entrepreneurs are viewed differently. 10 years ago, it was kind of a crazy thing to become an entrepreneur. Now it's kind of in fashion. I don't know if we're on the opposite side.
Yeah, if you think about that, I started like 12 years ago when being an entrepreneur was totally uncool. And I call it a bit the mother's factor. At my time, when I started, my mother stopped talking about me in Christmas dinner. Like, Miguel is not anymore fashion. I wouldn't talk anymore about him. And now when I see this, I see that mothers are surely talking about their kids joining startups. So we were competing against Telefonica or Indra for the talent. Now everybody wants to be part of this, not just as a founder, but also as an employee. And that's a game changer, because now we can attract great people to work with us, and it's happening a lot. We see this all around. But I think that the key thing that I see still not so good is that it takes time. It takes like 10 more years of time to really be able to have all the second-time entrepreneurs with a scaling up experience who are able to just take a company and in 12 months really change it and make it go to the next level. And I would say we just like to punish ourselves too much in Spain. Like 10 years ago, everything was very bad. Now the improve has been amazing. So we still need to think that in 10 years' time, we're going to be in a totally different level with many more people with experience driving the growth. So I'm very optimistic about the future, about the ecosystem in Spain.
And do you think we need big exits to keep this sort of entrepreneurship momentum going? Because at the end of the day, returns or success is measured by economic returns, and that's what attracts both entrepreneurs and investors. So do you think we need like some successful, big successful stories to get young people engaged?
Wait a few more years for these three to to have an exit. I think the first unicorns are coming. Sure.
And I think I was discussing that with a university professor, and we're chatting that I would say several years ago, I would say 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be working for the government. They wanted stable jobs. Everybody was looking for that. So nobody was thinking, just coming out of school, thinking, okay, I'm going to start my own company. Now what he's telling me is when he's asking the students, so what do you want to do? There's a good amount of them who are telling, and they're saying, I want to start my own company. So it's a change in philosophy also in people, as they see that as a way of doing something else than working for a government or something more stable.
Okay. And talking about investing, and a question to you, Harry. Are you proactive or reactive? Because you have a European fund and you have all the market, basically. Do you come to Spain often? Do they call you? How did it happen with Scytl, for example?
Well, with Scytl, actually, with Scytl, we were proactive in that we were actually looking at another, I hate to admit, we were looking at another voting technology company. I won't say which. And we research the market as we usually do. You know, it's how we often work, as we'll, you know, say, this is interesting, let's see who else there is. And we've discovered Scytl. They already raised a small round from a good local VC here. And they seem to have the best technology and the best traction in terms of getting, you know, tier 1 countries, if you can have tier 1 countries, on their voting platform. So at that stage, you know, we reached out to them and made that large investment, and we obviously followed up. So that would be an example of proactive. I think generally, though, in Spain, you know, marks out of 10 for our proactivity, probably about 4. We need to do a lot more. And I was actually in Valencia last week, and I'm going to try and be here more. And I think, you know, that it seems like the ecosystem here is improving a lot. But you know, we have 2 investments here at the moment. I'd like to do more, but at the moment it's probably more reactive, if I'm honest. It's people like Miguel getting in touch, and or Ben. I think you got in touch with us rather than us in touch with you when you were raising. So luckily, we have a reputation, and a lot of good companies do come our way. But you know, I think ultimately we've got to be on the ground here to find things early.
Mm-hmm. And Chris and Ciarán, is it the same case? You're reactive in general?
From our perspective, we were, to Harry's point, it's about 4th within the European plus Israeli ecosystem that we look at in terms of priority, but more recently, we've seen a lot of more opportunities come out of Spain, to be honest. We've done 2 this year alone, and we're tracking quite a few more others. So it's becoming a lot more of a proactive rather than a reactive approach. We have 3 of the 12 members of the team here for this event, for example, which is unheard of for us to bring a quarter of the team for the event. So it is a market, both Spain, Portugal, and overall the southern, because we are at a South Summit in a sense, ecosystem producing great entrepreneurs. I think it's a combination of the entrepreneurs stepping up and coming out to outreach to us as well, and us doing proactive research, and all the different components of the ecosystem contributing to the entrepreneurs popping up. For example, we met Packlink at Pathways, one of the other events last year. So it all is beginning to come together. Yeah. It's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, I think on a 1 to 10 scale, we're more on the 1. So really bad at being proactive. And I'll be honest, you know, I think we just stumbled into a meeting Carto DB, and I know that people spin a more fancy story, but that's how it was. But then in shock and horror, we realized, you know, oh my God, we're completely missing out. There's lots of things going on. Our view was very ignorant/arrogant in a sense of, you know, whatever happens down south, basically. And you know, we've kind of had this shock experience where we've realized that, you know, lots of companies here, also lots of investors, are absolutely on par with anything you'd find elsewhere in Europe. And so we hope to notch up from 1 to 4. That would be a start, and get it to 10 eventually. But I'll be honest, we have been, and I'm assuming, besides the larger London funds, most funds in Europe will be very reactive regarding to this region. So it's good to get them here, have them have a little shock experience, and change things.
The other thing that does change things a lot is that there's a sort of virtuous cycle that once you have an investment somewhere, and you're flying out here every month. So my colleague Bernard comes out to Barcelona more or less every month, I think. And that means that he's got that moment, and he knows he's going to be there on the 22nd. And it makes him want to find other interesting companies there. And I guess, you know, so the more we're all investing here, the more we'll all be here, and hopefully be more proactive.
And just one final point, because I know that you have us strict on time.
No, don't worry.
At the end of the day, we also, given that we're based in one location in London and Berlin, we cannot be everywhere. But what we do build is strong relationships with local investors that, I mean, for example, in all investments that we've done locally, we've done them with a local fund as a syndicate to help us out being local. So I hear a lot of entrepreneurs here saying, how do I get access to capital internationally and bypass the Spanish investors? We're going to come back to them. Whether you come to us, we're going to come back to them and try and bring them in to help us manage it together. So I think it's better to build relationships with the local ecosystem as well, because they know us and they'll outreach to us as well. So
That's good to hear.
And I think there's one more point here. It's just in terms of the changes that have happened. Is basically I'm seeing, at least in Barcelona, we see a lot of people coming from Europe who are starting business in Barcelona, and that's very interesting. People are coming down either to Madrid or Barcelona also for the lifestyle, and they're seeing also an opportunity to start a business here and then grow it from here. So
Well, look at Ben.
yeah.
Oh, yes?
But you're kind of a Brit who started a business here. You're sort of British, aren't you?
Say that again. I can't quite hear the...
You're
Oh, sorry.
British.
You're kind of a British guy in Spain.
Oh, yes, yeah, that's me, yeah.
Half British guy.
Yeah, has it made it easier in terms of going out and getting funding and that sort of stuff?
No, I'm just saying that you're someone who's come from abroad. You're an example of someone who's come from abroad and started your business in Madrid.
Yep.
Which is a good
yeah,
sign.
I think it has helped in terms of getting funding, definitely. I mean, being English always helps, really, in a way.
Really?
But do you think it helped you in terms of getting funding?
There are small disadvantages occasionally, but I think no, it has. Maybe not so much in terms of being English or being from outside Spain. I think what I find has helped is having had experience outside of Spain, just working or living or whatever. Because then when you're going out and getting funded or trying to get people on board or to hire people, you can go to you can go to Germany or to the UK. You can meet people. You can sort of widen your funding possibilities. It's true that finding. Are we still talking about finding funding, or am I going way off topic? Do you want me to keep on talking?
Yeah, no.
Yeah?
You can talk for a minute.
I can keep on going forever.
You know I'm very organized.
But if the question was just about the English, it's quite nice.
You're answering a question that I have for later, but I'll come back to that. So looking at these three companies, they're very international, the three of them. They have very limited exposure to Spain at the end of the day. Is it something that is a must for you to invest? You need to look at global companies and...
Absolutely. I mean, look, we like the other guys here at Balderton, we are, we're a large fund. We've raised 2 billion of capital to date and a bit more. And the way that the venture model works, I'm sure most of you know this, is that the people that give us money, let's say that we raise 300 million, and they're hoping that in 10 years' time we're going to give them 900 million back. And the way that we do that isn't by investing in lots of companies that do 3x, it's investing in one or two that do 50x, or 10x, 20x, and a whole lot of others that might not work out or might do okay. But we're always looking, the returns are completely driven by the 1, 2, 3, 4 companies in each fund that go really, really big. So we will only invest in a company if we think this could be at least the European winner in its space, depending on the size of the space, but ideally the global winner. Which is a nice factor about Spain, is that most Spanish companies do say early on, let's launch in Mexico, let's launch in Argentina, let's expand out to other parts of the world. But we would never invest in a company that said, we want to be the winner in Madrid and only, obviously.
I guess it's the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I actually spend a lot of time educating entrepreneurs on purely the venture model, in the sense that, look, it's not you, it's us kind of thing. We have a massive fund, and to make the fund return, we need to make big bets. So.
Yeah.
I think also in a sense it's a proxy for the attitude of the team. So, we've been given this huge big gift dropped into our laps called the internet, and it changed many things. And one of the things that's changed is that where you distribute your services and goods, it can be entirely detached from where you build your goods in the most extreme way, and there's zero distribution costs. And if you don't use that opportunity, unless you've got very specific reasons why you're not using that opportunity to distribute your services globally, you're signaling for a different kind of mindset, and we'd rather back crazy maniacs that want to conquer the world, like the Spanish were very good at. So still keep that DNA going, and so you're by going local and then Portugal next and then maybe France, you're just signaling that maybe you're not the aggressive enough kind of person.
And do you think that the Latin American angle that we have in Spain is a real advantage? For us as a fund, for example, when we compete with other funds in Europe and the US, we do have an advantage when we invest in Mexico. It's quite clear. Do you feel it's the same with the companies themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I actually worked in I was CEO of a startup in Portugal, and obviously the first market we hit was Brazil. I think it's a combination of both a benefit and a potential pitfall if taken the wrong way, in the sense that, yes, you have a massive market that gives you access, which is, compared to Italy, for example, or something like that, is a huge benefit. As long as you do it with, again, a global mindset in mind, and not just say, okay, I have Mexico, so I'm only going to hit Latin American, so it's all going to be in Spanish, and I'm not going to think global in the consumer aspect, in the language aspect, and everything else.
Okay.
Build it global, think global, start local, and use, obviously, the Latin American angle, which is a massive benefit. It's a growing market. It's close culturally.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the great things about Scytl, I think, is that they've, from day one, they've wanted to be the best in the world. And what we see with some European companies, and I could name a few French startups, for example, where they will argue, look, we're not trying to be the best in the world. We'll let the American companies win in America, and we'll win in France and a few neighboring countries, and that's fine. The trouble is that if you don't fight the best early on, then they just get better and better and better, and you stay down here, and eventually, when they do enter your market, they've got a way better product. The amazing thing about software is, this incredible scalability that, the bigger you are, the more you can invest in your product, the better your product is compared to the competition, the more market you can take, the lower your marketing costs. It gives you this incredible virtuous cycle. And if you don't say, I'm going to be the best in the world, then you fall behind. And this is why Scytl is such an amazing company, is that it's now so hard for anyone else to match what Scytl can do in electronic voting and elections and government software.
And that was the view from the beginning.
I think that was the need. I mean, how much online voting was here at the beginning when everything started. So the market was out there. And from the beginning, you start to figure out, so how do I start a global company from Barcelona? So you're not thinking of a Spanish company. This is a global company. The fact that we're in Barcelona is just a random fact.
If I may just add to that briefly, and I think following what you just said, Harry, if you have a very good technology and you want to be the best in the world, then you should decide you want to go for I think it's François Debet who says that, like hard butter or soft butter. You want to have something where your knife will cut very easily, and you should go maybe to LATAM because there you can have easier access, or you want to go to really hard butter and go to the US and fight the champions on the web. So if you want to you really think your technology is differential, you should go for the Champions League on the web and go to the US. This is why I think we are trying to be more on the US. If you are more having a copycat or seeing a business model in the US, I want to replicate it fast in Spain and LATAM, then you could do that. It's a legit game, but you should decide first what game you are playing.
Yeah. And talk about funding, Miguel, how do you convince an international fund? Because obviously Spain is kind of restricted on the private funding, not on the public. We had the discussion yesterday, and my view is that there's a lot of public money for startups in Spain, but obviously when you look at the private venture capital industry, it's quite small.
I think we've been very lucky, actually. I think the exposure that we have globally had helped us getting the VCs coming back to us internationally. I think we had a great experience with Balderton. I think it's been spectacular working with them, and they have supported us in that goal. I think once you have a leading VC, one of the global leading VCs with you, they're going to help you building those nets and establishing to the next rounds.
And you, Miguel?
Yeah, I think there is a phase in life for everything. If you start everything is a bit messy. You have no money to do nothing, so your house is not very clean. So it's easier to show this to a friend, like another Spanish VC, who will just trust you because they know you from before, they know the language, so you can start talking about how messy your house is and how to clean it up. And after this initial stage with the Spanish VCs, then you are ready to go for the international VCs. And then you can really convince them, and even with your Spanish accent, they will trust you and think that you are the next big thing. And I think that even translates into talking to the US VCs. I think it's better to start with the big European VCs for a Series A, like the guys here, because not only they will trust you and invest in you because you are an international-minded European, they will also help you to do the move to the US if needed, because they have done that before. If you talk to the US guys, and we did that a lot, they all expect you to already be there and be American, 100% American from the beginning, but you are not, you will never be. They will not get your challenges about moving your family, about working with your team in Spain and everything. So I would say you should first start with local VCs for business angels, initial rounds, then get the big guys in Europe for the Series A, and then go for a Series B with the US guys. And if you miss one step, then you will be suffering a bit more. You can do it, but it's a bit more complicated.
Okay. So you think the right approach is to start maybe with a local firm and then go European and then...
I do think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Ben, what would be your advice then for a Spanish company that already has Spanish investors?
It's very difficult to really hear. I'm sorry. It's
like, very hard for us to hear each other.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't get anything, but it's quite
saying.
difficult.
I don't even know what they're saying. A question for Ben.
Okay.
What would be your advice to a Spanish company
Yep.
that already has a Spanish VC on board and that has to make it to the next level like you guys have done? What's the approach? Because we all know they're all trying to do it, obviously, and it's the natural step. So
Yeah, I think maybe it's always nice dishing out advice when I've only got a couple of years of experience of actually getting funding, like I'm some sort of expert or something. But I mean, for our Series A, I did end up going around Europe a lot just to meet lots of different funds. I think maybe the useful thing there is to just not be afraid of going to London or Berlin or Paris and having to go through pretty daunting meetings in the end, where you have to actually present stuff that you've literally prepared the day before, and you're having to come across as an expert in a field that you're not necessarily very, very proficient in. So I think if I could give some sort of a lesson I learned from the last round, which was like a 6-month sort of round, meeting lots of different people, is to just look within Spain and outside of Spain, and just don't limit yourself on your own. I think a lot of people maybe limit themselves in terms of what type of funding they think they can get, how much they think their company's worth, and then you think, okay, well, I might just limit myself initially to Spanish funds because I don't think I'm going to be able to invest in a big American fund or a big English fund. And I think the reality is a little bit different. It's like usually confirmed that, okay, the big funds really aren't interested initially, especially in seed rounds or Series A. But they do show an interest, and in the end, what you're doing is probably worth more than you think. Often, occasionally it isn't.
Okay.
But you have to go from the premise that it might be. So just meet the big funds, the big daunting names, and the big partners, and the people with massive experience. And some of them are actually quite nice, and they'll help you, and they'll make intros to nice people.
Okay. So on your side, what do you have to see in a company or in an email, in a phone call, to get that? To give them that meeting, because from experience, I know it's not that easy. You get tons of.
I mean, God, I'm talking too much. Sorry. There's for me, what I'm really looking for, which is, I hope, a high bar for any of us here, is there something so exciting about this team and what they're doing that I would strongly consider ditching my job to go and join them? And I guess what that plays into is, is this a real game changer of an opportunity? And is this an entrepreneur that has some really special qualities? And it's hard to define what those qualities are, right? Every entrepreneur is different, every entrepreneur is a maverick, but they tend to be incredibly passionate about what they're doing. They tend to be very good at getting stuff done. They sort of get 5 times as much done each day as someone else. They tend to be people that can inspire a team that you want to hang around with. So that would be my ultimate test, I guess.
But that's once you've met the company,
once
you've met the team,
oh,
and they're
sorry.
great.
From the email
How
or
do
the
they get
phone
that
call.
meeting?
I mean, it's usually either a warm introduction from someone I respect, or they say something in there. If they just email me direct, they say something that is, it's quite concise. They don't have a 20-page email, so they talk to me. They understand who I am, understand what I might be interested in, and ask for something relatively, easy as a first step. So it's like, I'm going to be in town on next Wednesday and Thursday. Do you have half an hour to meet? I see you've done this in the past, and I think you could be really helpful because this is what I do. That sort of simple, quick, a couple of key facts to get me interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just second that. And the reason why that's important is it could easily be interpreted as us being arrogant, like, oh, we only want warm introductions, and please don't write me a long email because I don't have time to read your email. But what you're really signaling is building a company is pretty tough. And if you can't even manage today with LinkedIn, Twitter, everything, if you can't even manage to get a warm introduction and be precise and to the point, well, you're probably going to struggle building a really big company. Yeah. So it's not us being arrogant. It's just like you're signaling for the first time what kind of person you are, and that's why we're kind of looking at that kind of stuff. You got an email.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's absolutely critical for me, especially the warm introduction aspect. Definitely do your homework. We live in an online world. Everything we do and everything we say is online. I think the more creative ways of figuring out what we're interested in and what we like and approaching the right people within the firm is a lot more targeted. Rather, if you call me and say I'm doing a hardware company, doing ABC, and I'm like, look, thanks, but it's not what I'm interested. I'm happy to help you, but use warm introductions for sure. The other thing that I would say, going back to what you were asking the guys earlier, is start early. Even if you think that you're very early for us or for any firm, start building a relationship. What we do is a relationship business. So if you don't start building that trust and coming back every 3 to 6 months and say, remember what I told you I was going to be, I'm X or I'm at Y, let's have a conversation now. It's even better when you're not looking for money.
Yeah.
So start making that connection with the folks that you like. And it's a two-way business. It's not just us liking you. You have to like who you're working with as well. So if you don't get to know us, you won't know. It's not about the brand. It's not just about the money. It's who you're going to go to bed with for the next 8 to 10 years. So
Not literally.
Not literally.
No, I agree. I think it's much better if the company's not looking for money because it's more natural and you just have, some visibility on the business, and then you come back 3 months later, and it's certainly better. So a question for the three of you. The three of you have Spanish VCs as investors, and then you have international VCs. How would you compare the two, and what could each learn from the other? I know it's a tricky question, but since I'm here, I would like to hear it.
Yeah, let's start with somebody else.
Please.
I think they're both great. I think everybody brings different skills to the table. I think the fact that a lot of the Spanish VCs, they are not Spanish VCs anymore. So I think what we're seeing is just what used to be a local scene here is changed. I think most or a lot of the VCs here, they do have offices outside because they're looking for deal flow outside. And I think in terms of what they're better or different, I think sometimes connection is networking, giving you access to a specific market, to specific people. But besides that, in terms of the skills are pretty, I think, very similar. It's just in terms of the ability to take it to the next stage.
Okay.
That's a difficult question. I will make a broad answer talking about their VCs, not my VCs.
Well,
hypothetical VC that
yeah,
I
like
met,
a generic.
Okay, so I would say the
Local
biggest,
versus international. It doesn't
local
have to be Spanish. Local versus international.
I would say is still a lack or a difference in size and probably also still in vision. So Spanish VCs are still too much focused. I'm not watching you, Beatriz, but too much focus on revenue, which is nice, but on really of monthly revenue growth, and the bigger funds are more about the global impact you're going to make to do a 1 billion company. Probably to make the 1 billion company, you just doesn't need to just be growing this 15% per month, but be having a broad thinking about where you're going, how you want to tackle the community, how you want to do this and that. So this kind of thinking is still a bit more, you see it more in the international VCs than in the local ones. But it's changing too, I would say.
Yeah. And Ben?
I think I've actually had really good experiences with Spanish VCs in general. So I wouldn't. Where I found more difficulties is maybe with French VCs. Actually, I find French VCs more difficult to work with. But Spanish VCs, you know, in the end, when you talk about Spanish VCs, right, some of the funds in Spain, if you're looking at 50 to 100 million funds, so you're looking at you know, active venture partners who invested in us. They're not really Spanish, you know, they're sort of half German, half Swedish. You're looking at, you know, you got Seaya in Madrid, Mikel German, you know. So I think they're Spanish VCs, but very often there's an international component in them already, which makes them international VCs. I think they just happen to be here. And I find their outlook is actually quite international and becoming even ever more so, I think. So only good things to say, really. I don't think there's a stigma around you know, the Spanish VCs being less less performance-based or anything. Not in my experience. I just they've really helped us to grow and helped us look outside of Spain and within Spain, and are very open-minded, and just generally just nice to do business with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we have 4 minutes for questions. I don't know how this works.
No question.
You can ask us anything.
Nothing? Oh, over there.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, good morning. It's really great to hear from people with such an experience of you. And I want to know, as I have a startup in ICT here in Spain, how do you think that ICT startup, particularly social web startup, are doing in Spain comparing to the rest of Europe?
We have 3 perfect examples right here.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, for starting in Spain, I think just one thing maybe relates to the last question a little bit as well. If you're thinking of raising funds in Spain and looking for Spanish VCs or looking elsewhere, I think it's a nice place to start, because in the end, most VCs actually like to have somebody local, you know, somebody who's not too far away from them physically, especially in the seed phase. So whichever way you look at it in the seed phase, even if you find a really good match with a small VC in Paris, for example, they're going to struggle to get over the geographical distance, especially if you haven't proven your business model yet. So in the end, you end up having to go for a local VC, whether you like it or not, in a certain phase of your development, which is okay. One thing I'd look out for maybe is if you're negotiating term sheets or shareholder agreements, and when you start looking at, you know, the whole setup of the funding you're going to be doing. There's a tendency here maybe to be a little bit more tough on the entrepreneur than in the US maybe. So just maybe try and find agreements that sort of international standards in terms of what they expect from you and what you can expect from them.
And if I may add something to that, try to gain local experience with your business, but always have this international mindset. Do not constrain yourself to Spain, but think always that this is going to be a global business, because it should, and it can. So.
Hi, I'm Shaheen from spotahome.com. We're a startup and for expats to find housing in another country before they move abroad. Rental properties. Anyway, my question is about, Miguel had said that to raise your first round in Spain and then go for your Series A in the rest of Europe. Is there any reason not to go outside of Spain to begin with? What's the benefit of starting in Spain?
Let me answer first, but then we're going to have some controversy, which is nice. So I would say, because if it's a small round, there is no incentive for somebody from Berlin to be coming here and meeting you. Business angels need to be a bit local, because they do more. It's like a very expensive hobby to be a business angel. So you really need to have some emotional tie to that. So it's much more easy that you're going to have somebody who's going to invest in you locally, because you're going to meet them and talk to them much more. That's my idea. So.
Yeah, I think the only exception there would be if you're a business that it's very specialized in an area that funding is coming from normally either the UK or the US, and there's a lot of funding coming from those other countries in that specific field. But if not, I think it makes sense to start local. It makes it easier too. Some of these guys may be local soon, so I think the whole thing it's a lot of the VCs that we think they're global or they're foreign based. Actually, a lot of these guys, they're going to have offices in Spain soon, so I think they're going to become part of the local ecosystem.
It's hard for us to cover everywhere, right? And I'd say generally, the earlier stage our investment, the more we like it to be within easy reach. Seed, we do a few seed investments, but we'll never do a seed investment if it's a long way away, because we need to be closer to the company at that stage. And because we have limited numbers of people, Accel have 12 investors, we have 10, I don't know about you, but 4, there we go. Managing a lot of money and a lot of investments, it just means that particularly for that early stage where you need to be really close to the company, talking to them all the time, there's that extra barrier if it's far away.
And I think that at the beginning, having trust from people that are close to you is a great sign. Putting your money on your company is the best sign. And then your family, and then your friends, and then a fund that knows you really well, and then international funds. In our case, in our fund, it was easier to get international investors on board once we had the local ones, because they know us better. They see us every day. So I think that that kind of trust is important. So we're out of time. No? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.